Hey everybody, thank you guys so much for coming. I think we all know and are a little bit confused by blockchain. It doesn't matter how much time you spend in the industry, it just really hasn't been around long enough for that many people to be true experts. I asked our panelists earlier, about how many people who are in the blockchain industry actually don't even understand it. They said about 40%. So if you're sitting there thinking, hey, I don't really understand this whole thing, you're in good company. Most of the people in this business don't either. But we're going to try to teach you as much as we can today because there's huge opportunity for the blockchain to change the way that advertising works. And we've put together an incredible set of speakers today who really do understand it, unlike most of the other people. So I'm Josh Constine. I'm the editor-at-large for TechCrunch. I've spent the last 6 years there writing about early-stage startups, blockchain, streaming music, social networks, and I've led over 100 talks in 13 countries with people like Edward Snowden, Mark Zuckerberg, and Senator Cory Booker. But I'm really excited today to have these panelists here because from all over the world, they're coming to give you an insight into what's going to happen in this next year so your businesses can be prepared. So maybe you guys can each introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what your business does.
Yeah, so my name's Fred Schebesta. I'm the co-founder of Finder.com, and that is an Australian accent. We started off in Australia. We've got about 200 staff now. We just started to market into the US and the UK with Finder.com. And we're a massive comparison site, so we compare everything. You can just type Finder.com in there. And yes, we did buy that domain name from a person who bought it very early on in the internet. And that's probably where the blockchain is right now as well. So yeah.
Hi, my name is Arianna Simpson. I've been in kind of the crypto space for about 5 years. I was working at Facebook when I fell down the rabbit hole in 2013 and ended up leaving and joining a Bitcoin company in 2014 and 15. And I was a little bit early, but it's worked out pretty well since then. So now I run a fund that invests across the ecosystem, some venture equity investments and some coin and token investments as well.
My name is Akbarpour. I'm co-founder and CEO of Mavatar Technologies. For the last 7 years, my team and I have spent our lives to disrupt push advertising models and all the existing attribution models like CPM, CTR, CPC, and everything else that we feel that doesn't help retailers to track their advertising dollars to marketing dollars, and it doesn't help consumers because consumers need to process tons of data for making the best shopping decisions, and unfortunately, none of these models are providing that advantage for them. So our platform creates a shoppable world for people and create an ecosystem where retailers, influencers, and shoppers can work hand in hand to create an effective value chain.
Great, thank you guys so much. So if you guys have questions, which I am sure you will, please submit them through the RampUp app. I'll catch them up here in this iPad, and we'll ask the best ones as we ramp down the panel at the end. And I just want to say thank you to the RampUp organizers, because there are so many incredible women in the blockchain industry, and I'm really glad that we have 2 of them on stage. It's so important. It's so important to have a diverse set of perspectives represented, especially in this new kind of industry. We do not want it to end up like the old power structures. So I'm really glad that we have such an awesome set of panelists here today. So to kick things off, I want to start with Fred, who really has the most experience around advertising in the blockchain, to ask you a little bit about just what is the state of the industry of blockchain and advertising right now? Yeah,
so I'm going to be to put everyone's sort of mind and anxiety at ease when you go back to the office. Here's the take, is that right now there isn't much you can do. Blockchain just can't handle that number of transactions. Ethereum can manage about 20 transactions a second. Now if you're doing programmatic, you're talking billions of transactions a second. So there's no actual rollout right now, but there are a lot of plans and there are a lot of areas which I would high level look at. For example, data, right? So this is trend right now. You look at a company like Datum. They have a coin, DAT, where consumers are going to sell their data. You look at another one where a browser called Brave, very interesting model, where consumers are going to get paid to watch ads. These are the areas which I would be looking at. Another one is called MetaX. I'd strongly advise to look at that. That is a coin where all this click fraud and click traffic, which is another major trend in programmatic and an issue that's going on right now, I'd have a look at that. So these are the kind of areas I would look at, but there's nothing necessarily you need to necessarily do right now. We're kind of in this stage where there's lots and lots of projects and lots of people competing to do the same things, but we're really early on, like early internet, when we were building, hosting companies, and there was no such thing as WordPress, and there was no such thing as Squarespace. We're like early on in blockchain. And so my suggestion would be to really keep a tabs on those kind of companies.
So that's great. So we really are so early that maybe not everyone right now can move their business into the blockchain, but the idea is that people are going to be able to prepare themselves and understand where the opportunities are in this business. So one, that they can actually be ready when things do arrive, but two, so they don't get taken by some of the scamsters that we know are lurking in the cryptocurrency industry. Susan, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about where you see the real potential for blockchain in advertising. What is the promise that we're looking towards in 5 years?
Yeah, if you look at blockchain, the best promise of this technology is bringing transparency to any platform, any decentralized network. However, when you look at the old advertising models, all these fraudulent click-through rates, bot effects, and everything else, you see that the nature of the industry is not really aligned with the DNA of blockchain. We're not about transparency. There are a lot of middlemen, there are a lot of fraudulent actions, and a lot of ineffectiveness that blockchain can't really solve if we don't change and transform the base of the advertising industry. And when you look at the advertising industry, the push models, my parents started the first advertising agency in Iran, the country that I'm coming from, 60 years ago. And then I became a publisher later myself in life. And it's really funny because when I look at these advertising models are, again, the same format of the old advertising models in digital format. It's all push advertising. You're shoving down advertisements to consumers' throat, hoping that they extract value out of that, hoping that they see a relevancy between what they need and what you're offering. That doesn't happen. If we want this new technology, which is supposed to bring transparency to our world, work on that platform, on that industry, we really need to rethink our old models and come up with a more consumer-centric advertising, which is processing more data for consumers, as you said, helping them to compare products, helping them to get their arms around pricing, about anything. There are not that many metrics that consumers try to really optimize. Price, look, fit, and capability, proximity, where they can find these items, at what price they can buy it, and what are the other options. If we can help them to process that data, blockchain will definitely help on creating a user-generated advertising model.
Yeah, I think we're seeing this move into this third phase of advertising. You can think that for the first, hundreds of years, as long as we've had advertising, it was really about the business trying to just shove something down the throat of the consumer and convince them to buy it without providing them really anything in return. More recently, we've seen this sudden explosion of native advertising, sponsored content, where basically the advertisers are trying to provide some kind of value outside of their product to the consumer, whether that's through entertainment by recruiting interesting influencers to create really unique video, or through new sponsored articles where you're trying to disseminate information and use that to build your brand's reputation. But now we're really moving into this potential for a third phase where the companies who are advertising you can actually pay you to look at their ads. And I think that's an incredibly important shift to understand, is that because instead of you saying, we're trying to trick the users out of their time, we're trying to trick them out of their attention, it's becoming a real value exchange. And Fred, maybe you could tell us a little bit about that and how Brave is doing that. And that's based by Brendan Eichmann, who's one of the co-founders of Mozilla, and has moved on to create the Brave browser, which is a web browser, which has this token connected to it where companies can actually give you the token in exchange for you consuming their ads. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about where there's potential in that model.
Yeah. So This is obviously, yeah, so the founder of Mozilla or Firefox, which obviously was a major platform, major browser. They made their money through Google paying them to default the search browser. So, but this time the model is they've got ad blocking turned on by default. So all the cookies that you're trying to set, all the banner ads that are trying to be shown, all the advertisements, none of those fire. So you've got the consumer now in control. Now this browser is beautiful to use, by the way, if you want to have an ad-free browsing experience. Your Gmail and stuff still works as well and all those kind of things, so don't worry about that. But what you've got is essentially the power coming back to the customer saying, hey, we're going to actually pay you for your attention. We're going to pay you for your time, and we're going to pay you for your data. So all the data that we've been collecting for free, that eventually, my forecast will be that'll be a trend to being, you're going to have to pay the customer for that in some way. I think the potential is massive, right? Because you've got a marketplace now where people actively know what they're getting advertised, what data is actually going towards them, what's being sold and what's not being sold. That's a major trend. And these guys have got a history of doing this, right? Mozilla and Firefox just took over when IE was around, right? And Chrome obviously has taken over a lot more now. And the usage, but again, guys, so don't worry, the usage of Brave is very low right now. Just
your ads are not all being blocked because we're not
not
all
all.
on Brave just yet.
Having said that, I think ad blockers, I've heard stats in some verticals to being around 40 to 50%, depending on the vertical you're in. So if you're in a very tech-focused industry, I could imagine, Josh, you might not have some experience on this, but I could imagine there's very high usage of ad blocking. So imagine if but now all consumers by default don't need to tinker around with installing ad blockers, and by default that's a standard. I think that's a major trend and direction of where things are going. In terms of the marketplace, in terms of the transactions, in terms of the ads that you can buy and the formats, none of that has been solved, but I would watch that space. I would download the browser and just have a go and just look at the market, see how it works, and get used to it.
Yeah, I think what you're saying really is that as we move towards phase 3, I feel like that phase 1 advertising is going to become very passé because it's going to really stick out and say, you know, while these other two types of advertising, they're trying to provide me with content, they're trying to provide me with value directly, other people are trying to show me ads that are just blatantly exploitative, and I think the industry will increasingly turn away from that, and we're already seeing that with the massive adoption of ad blockers. So, you know, whether you're a publisher or, you know, trying to get people to look at ads on your site, or you're an advertiser buying them, there are tons of people that are missing them because of this long-standing trend of simply exploiting the customers.
I just want to add to that too, just with exploitive, so the extreme of exploitive that's going on right now is there are ads that come up on people's browsers and start a cryptocurrency miner. So they steal the person's computing power and actually process it, and they're making cryptocurrency money out of the back of that. Like that's the extremity of, you know, where some of that is gone.
If any of you are thinking, that sounds like a great idea, I should put that on my site, you should see the backlash that happens when people realize this. Even though they weren't using that computing power, they're probably not paying by the gigabit for their home or gigabyte for their home internet, but still people are really angry, so I highly recommend against that. Yeah. So Arianna, I wanted to ask you, people are talking a lot about the advertising area for blockchain, but what other areas of the blockchain do you see as relevant to publishers, marketers, and other companies in this space that they should also be looking at beyond purely programmatic advertising driven by blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're still figuring that out very much as it applies to marketing and advertising and kind of the industry as a whole. I think there's this great book by Carlotta Perez, which I highly recommend, and she basically looks at technological revolutions and financial capital. And so one of the main points that she makes, and by the way, this book was published in 2002 or something, so well before kind of the crypto mania. And she points out that in a lot of cases, for the first 15 years of a new technology, we don't actually know what the ultimate use cases are going to be. And I think we're still very much in the phase in which we're figuring that out. I invest mostly in the infrastructure layer because I think no matter what, and this applies very much to programmatic, we need to be able to support a much higher volume of transactions than we currently can. So there was this app that went viral a couple months ago called CryptoKitties. I don't know if any of you saw that, but It was kind of the first viral Ethereum app, and that went from 0 to 25% of Ethereum's network traffic in a matter of days. So obviously, if you have one app that goes sort of viral and it clogs up the entire network, I mean, imagine you're trying to, process a wire or something meaningful via the blockchain, and it gets clogged because your transaction can't go through because somebody's breeding cats on the blockchain. So until we kind of sorted out a lot of the scalability questions, we can't really get to the final use cases, and I think we're still very much in the infrastructure phase of this build out.
Can I add actually a point to this? Scalability is a huge issue on blockchain, and building your blockchain network on Ethereum is just the beginning of your journey, and I think that's a great test of water, but there are many technologies out there that allows you, after you test the water, to build your private blockchain using Oracle and IBM infrastructure. I know that the scalability in a short time might be an issue, but if we have that problem, it's a great problem to have, because immigrating from Ethereum a blockchain on Ethereum to a private blockchain is not that hard. So it's just a matter of spending resources if you really need to. So that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, I think that it's an important concept that, well, people think of CryptoKitties, which is basically like Tamagotchi, but on the blockchain, where you raise your own little digital cat that's totally unique, just like the blockchain. People think of it as a toy, but they often say that toys are the preludes to serious things. And I think that just the fact that something like this was able to go so viral and to explode, even just within the limited crypto community at the time, really shows that there's huge potential if you come up with an idea that really matters to people or that they really enjoy. And that could be something where your ads or your publishers are providing some kind of content or value to your consumers. And I really think that that's an opportunity. If you think of Pokemon as a publisher, and they gave these Pokemon Go experiences to people to further their brand, you got an idea of what you could do when you start giving away digital content or digital currency through a publisher or through a brand or media property. But yeah, that scalability issue is something that's really important. And I think one of the other issues is that as we move towards programmatic advertising on the blockchain, the problem is that you have publishers that want to test it, but they only want to test it if there's a ton of demand, if buyers and advertisers actually want to place ads on it. Meanwhile, the advertisers don't care if there's nowhere to actually put these ads. And so how are we going to deal with this chicken and the egg problem? How are we actually going to start to see exchanges or programmatic advertising move onto the blockchain?
Well, I'm not sure about programmatic. However, influence marketing, which is a very big trend, 16% of our advertising budget today is actually spent on that channel. But the major bottleneck for that model to advance further was the micropayments, which was basically settled and organized by affiliate networks. But as you see in the last 2 decades, affiliate networks came out with the promise of cost per transaction, and that model vanished over years. They started with cost per acquisition. We're helping you to acquire the shoppers. How much they buy, you know what, let's not think about it, right? Because that's not a lucrative model. And then they moved towards click-through rate, which was not, again, another effective way of spending the advertising dollars. Later on, they introduced CPM again. So they went exactly the same route of the push advertising models, while they came with the promise of monetization of content and really resonate with people, because content creates an emotional connection between shoppers and products. But they really moved out from that original model that they promised, because they saw more lucrative models of becoming profitable. Today, we got to the point that 90% of the affiliate network's revenue goes to maybe handful of publishers. I call them favored nation publishers. If you look at, for example, Linkshare, you see that 90% of the revenue goes to eBay. eBay is a Rakuten company, right? And they are silver plating the traffic to eBay, which is coming up in the last stage of transaction, and they say that click on this and I gave you a rebate, 1% of the transaction. So they really didn't do anything from discovery to transaction. They didn't help any part of the customer's journey, and now they are basically hijacking the last click transactions. Programmatic also wouldn't be helpful because at the end of the day, one of these retailers who is selling that product, they see 4 people raising their hands and they saying that, okay, I influenced this transaction. The others say that I did this, I did that. If we come back to the original promise of affiliate networks and monetization of content, influence marketing is a huge deal and promise, and we know 83% of the marketers today, they're thinking about an effective way of doing influence marketing. However, dealing with macro payments is really difficult, and that's how blockchain and cryptocurrency can come to the play and help these retailers to directly connect with the influencers or their ambassadors.
Yeah, if I can just add one quick thing. I've been seeing a lot of kind of influencer marketing on blockchain via the idea of digital collectibles. So not just the idea of like, okay, you can breed your cats, but like personalities or celebrities basically creating these scarce digital commodities, which people are paying like shocking amounts of money for. And so that's, I think, kind of a completely new model because it's in some ways like similar to physical merchandise, but because it's digital, a blockchain is actually a really effective way to track ownership, and you can prove that there's only one and that you have it. And I think we're going to see that I think is going to be one of the bigger trends in consumer-facing blockchain applications in the next few years.
And in fact, you can get shoppers even involved in verification of that transaction through the smart contract, which is a huge deal. Because shoppers up to now was completely out of this picture, and now you're bringing them, you reward them for verification of the sales, which is a big deal.
So it seems like we're trying to move towards actually understanding the transaction and the sale at the end, rather than advertising being paid for around how many people saw it, how many people clicked it, how many people actually visited your site, but you still don't really know if they ever spent the money. And so I think this idea of improved transparency by knowing exactly who did what through the blockchain without all these middlemen who you can't always trust is an opportunity here. So Fred, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think every new technology starts in a niche, right? It's a small niche that brews the first use case. Now, if you look at this kind of advertising, you're talking about high trust advertising, confirmed, trusted sales, right? So if you think about I guess the industries that built the internet, the adult industry, the pills industry, the gambling industry, those are the ones that formed the internet. If those models, I guess, trust is not as lucrative to them. They want to spam as many ads out there and get as many people on board their platforms and as fast and as quickly as possible. So torrent sites with huge amounts of traffic. I don't think that's where the programmatic's going to start. And those guys tend to be the areas right now where there's huge amounts of traffic and they sell large amounts of that data onto these exchanges. So I'm thinking you're going to go more for areas where you've got high trust publishers selling very, very high quality ad units and ad placements and data. And they want to show that trust, so they're going to use the blockchain. I think that's the area it might begin.
Got it. So you think that we're sort of seeing the same thing that happened in the early days of the internet. It was Vice and these kind of companies that maybe don't operate as well on traditional banking methods or are sort of shunned by some of mainstream society that really found their home on the blockchain that found their home on the internet. And I think we saw that at the beginning of the blockchain with the Silk Road and all of the drug sales. And now eventually we're finally starting to see more legitimate business. There's been all sorts of ICOs that I really hope you guys didn't invest in this year. But there are...
Didn't?
Yeah, I hope you didn't, because most of them, even if they look good now, I would just be very dubious about them. But we're finally starting to see companies like Telegram, which actually have a real product involved, starting to create their own tokens and currencies. And I think we're starting to shift away from it being purely about people who are shunned by the rest of society and are kind of the people you might not want to deal with normally. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm talking about the people you guys invest in. But I think we're moving now finally towards more legitimate businesses. But that said, there are still so many people who you really can't trust in this business, and there's a lot of hype. There's so many things that people talk about being, oh, cryptocurrency is going to solve everything. My favorite new one is like, oh man, like cryptocurrency is going to solve distributed computing. It's like, no, I think Amazon has a pretty good handle on that. Like, if you really think that there's a problem, like I think a lot of the crypto industry and crypto businesses that have and blockchain businesses that have emerged don't actually start with a real problem. They start with this like far-flung idea of like, oh, I want to take a thing and put it on the blockchain. Yeah. We definitely get pitches at TechCrunch where it's like, we're going to put AI on the blockchain. It's like, all right, but do you have drones? It's like, yeah, we got drones too. Yeah, totally, drones on the blockchain. Like, people make no sense. They literally just lie through their teeth. And so I want to ask you guys, what are some of those like ridiculous fat lies that you guys have heard people talking about in the crypto industry, especially surrounding advertising and marketing, which our audience members should watch out for?
If you look at we had 1,000 ICOs last year, and investors had 1,300% ROI on those ICOs, which is really high compared to the traditional model.
Yeah, but people don't really understand that people made a lot of money on Ethereum and Bitcoin, are despereately trying to diversify their portfolios and are dumping money into low-quality ICOs because it's better than having all their chickens or their eggs in one basket.
Exactly.
That does not mean these are good companies.
But it was last year. It was
ICO.
Definitely last year. This year, you will see better applications, better use cases of blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And if I put my investor hat back, I invested on Telegram. I'm investing in a couple other currencies for the next few months. However, I have 3 simple metrics for investing on any platforms. I don't want my investment to go to a promise of building an underlying platform and then integrating with blockchain later. Right? That's a no to me, because I know as a software developer, I know what can go wrong to not to be able even to build that underlying platform, and then build a blockchain on top of that. So that is for me is a very solid metrics. I'm investing on a blockchain-ready platforms. And if I can see the second metrics is if I can see the utility of the token within that blockchain. There were great ICOs out there that even if you take the token out of it, you see that the platform still works. So there's no value for the token later. And as an investor, I probably don't get any ROI on that. The third one is, again, the same metrics that every investment models, traditional models will have been using. Team. Right? You look at the team and you see that if these guys are doers, or there's this student come out of the school and they have a very hairy agenda or goal or objective, as you said, to build a blockchain and use it in AI. But to do what? To solve what problem? And are you creating a problem for the solution that you're trying to send out, or you're really solving a problem? I give you a very, very good example of how, for example, our platform's utility, the utility of our token was established. Last year, we created this Uber for retail sales with the hope of making the world shoppable. And we went to these top retailers and we told them that you can turn every of your shoppers to become an influencer. The question that got back to us was really disappointing. Who is taking care of the accounting part? Today, I send one big check to an affiliate network, and I know that they're giving most of it to favored nations publishers, but at least I send one check, and then they pouring the traffic to my site. We didn't have an answer because the accounting could kill that scalable product. But when we came up with a token and added to that system to reward the shoppers for verification of the sales and to reward the influencers to promote the products real time, we solved that bottleneck. Otherwise, our platform without that token wouldn't have worked.
But the thing is, like, just because you added a token didn't change the business model, right? So I think
no, business model was was
It was
completely out of the, out of the picture if we couldn't,
I think-
if we didn't integrate with the token.
But I think okay, let's talk about what are the shit coins out there.
Yes,
anything
please.
you put, just anything that says you put in $1 and you get $1 billion back, that's a shit coin.
Definitely.
Anything that tells you we have a magic formula where we can arbitrage the market and we know where it's going and all those kind of things, that's a bullshit shit coin.
Yeah.
Anything where you have a magical computer program that we know and no one else knows, shitcoin. There are smarter people in Google, Facebook, all those kind of things that have already tried to solve those kind of things, right? What else is a shitcoin? Anything that's trying to solve what Amazon, Google, or Facebook are trying to do, shitcoin. Those guys have already gone down this path. They've got hundreds of people smarter than people who are in the blockchain.
They've asked me what to do, so I don't know about that.
And-
No, I assure you, I've had a lot of.
That's a
meetings
good
with
person to
very-
ask about, right?
And they buy
Well,
disruptive technologies all
But I would
the
say
time.
that they asked
I-
you because they looked and they couldn't figure out, is there a
Well,
real need
Exactly.
to do something
Yeah,
for the
but
blockchain?
so I think that's, it's just indicative of where they are. And I don't think saying, oh, well, these guys already have the resources,
Sure.
just means you shouldn't look into it. And the reason that they're, I think at this point they're becoming the incumbent. They are the disruptable companies. And so, yeah, they have huge amounts of resources to throw at this problem, but they are very much in the, oh, fuck, what do we do? Excuse my French. And I think if you look at Zuckerberg, he came out and was like, oh, this year it's the year of decentralization, looking into crypto. So, I think there's actually, they're starting to pay attention. They don't really know what they're going to do there, but attention is being paid. But, I think there are a lot of garbage coins out there, and I think that's true. But I actually think that dismissing the industry offhand is really a bad idea, because what I'm seeing, and I spend 100% of my time looking at investments in this space, is that there used to be this trend where people were like, B-level entrepreneurs, and they were like, oh, I want to start a company, let's put it on a blockchain, and let's figure out a problem and try to stick it to a blockchain. And actually what I've seen in the last 9 months, and this is why I'm now investing exclusively in the space, is there are a lot of really senior, smart, accomplished people coming from other industries who have domain expertise saying, oh, our industry has this problem. And I mean, it's a huge multitude of different issues, like tracking art provenance on the blockchain, all kinds of different things that you wouldn't necessarily think of and that are not at all connected to monetary use cases for cryptocurrencies. So actually, there's a lot of garbage out there, but you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater because
Let me
you
clarify.
look, all the VCs, they're all like, oh, whoops, we missed this, and they're all amending their LPAs so that they can invest in tokens. There's a real shift happening here.
I guess here's my
Always
submission.
it's cheaper to acquire those innovative companies for Google and Facebook and others.
You
because
can't
a big
acquire
company,
token networks.
Innovation is really
So
hard.
that's actually going to be a really big issue, because acquisitions of token networks are practically impossible. We have no precedent for this, and it will be very difficult. What are you acquiring, right? These are decentralized distributed networks. And so, some of these companies are actually the most ripe for being disrupted because they can't acquire, the network, and
The code
they're
could be
could
forked.
potentially eating into their business models.
So I think here's my prediction on this. If you're going to look at stuff like that, really, really frontier investing, I would look at coins or businesses that don't have an ICO. There are coins out there, there are businesses, there are blockchain businesses that are currently being developed, and they have very small groups, beautiful meetups, big groups of people, and they're not trying to do an ICO. They've got nothing to do with ICO. The word in ICO is not, they don't care. They're not trying to go out and build an investment and hype it and do those kind of things. Those are the kind of companies.
You mean crowd sale? Investment
crowd
in
sale,
ICO,
ICO,
done
token
into-
generation event, whatever you want to call
Well,
it.
it's a fundraising method. And in fact, I just wrote an article in Forbes exactly about that. ICOs, I think, are the best for bringing the early adopters in the community to pay attention to technology.
Well,
right?
FinCEN came
Because
out
most
today
of
and they
them
were
are
not very
developers.
positive on it, so I would be careful. The ICOs have basically been unregistered securities offerings, which is a big no-no. The SEC and FinCEN are not into that.
For crowd sale. part of it. For pre-sale, it's okay. It's still security. You're working with accredited
No, but
investors
they're
in
not
the United
treating it
States.
as a security, and they need to be.
Right.
So
I
they
think-
have not registered. You can do these things in a compliant manner,
Right.
but like pretty much nobody has done it. So that's going to be a big issue.
It's
so
a $500,000
none of this also
legal
is like
fee.
investment advice. None of this is investment
I'm
advice.
currently a little
I'm-
bit drunk, so don't take any of my...
But in terms of what you can actually use for your business, I think what they're trying to say is that if there's a company out there who's like trying to scam consumers out of their dollars
You
through
would
an
know.
ICO,
You would
they're
know.
probably not going to be the best like programmatic marketing business partner for you long term. Like you should be really looking at the companies that have look legit all the way down the board. Like you said, they already have something built. They have real utility to their product. They have a great team, not people who would just say, "Oh, we managed to go on Instagram and scam people out of $50 million for our ICO."
And big
before
law
anyone was
firm
looking."
behind that ICO.
Yeah.
That's $500,000 to $1.5 million check.
Right.
Right?
So,
if you don't have that, it means that you're doing something wrong, especially for the companies registered in the United States. We have to actually figure out what SEC can come up with for the next 5 years, and we try to not to do this stuff when we're predicting them. So a law firm would definitely be a good metric for
So
us.
speaking of regulation and some more sort of geopolitical issues, we received a question from the audience that asked, could the blockchain transparency help us resolve the Russia propaganda ad buying situation? Which I think is really, it seems laughable, but
Fake
it's actually pretty
news.
pertinent considering one of the biggest issues right now is that these big social networks do not have very much information on the advertisers that they work with. They basically get money in the mail. They might have an address for them, but it's very easy to just set up some company here and funnel the money to them and then buy the advertising. And so, you know, we're seeing companies like Facebook say that they're going to start looking into and requiring, you know, more signed documentation about who you are and why you're buying these ads. But do you guys think that some of this issue will actually help?
Definitely, because this, especially if we actually shift the power to poll advertising, the creator of that content, it can look like an ad or whatever. The creator of the content is clear in that ecosystem and network, and you can see who has paid for what and who has been affected. Definitely, blockchain make that image really transparent.
Anybody else?
I don't talk about politics, especially in this country.
All right.
But you know, I think you're talking about KYC of advertisers, right? And I've never heard that before. I don't think is it illegal to advertise? I don't know. Is that what we're talking about here? I'm not sure what the laws are around that. Maybe
That's really the problem, is that there aren't proper laws against this. You know, we have a ton of regulation around political advertising on television and on radio and things like that, and we just really haven't been able to keep up on the internet. So right now, I want to see, where do you guys think we're going to be going next? Like, if you had to have a wish list of products or infrastructure that you would like to see that will enable the kind of innovation that the people in this room really want to help integrate into their businesses, what do you think are those next steps? What are the things we need to build?
So, you know,
Well,
Arianna?
I think for me, there's the two S's, which are scalability and security. So I think, you know, historically, people have been able to be pretty la-ti-da about managing their passwords. And I think, you know, with a lot of the big data breaches, we're starting to pay attention to this a little bit. But unfortunately, consumers show time and time again that they'll trade privacy, they'll trade security for convenience. And you know, it's one thing if you have to reset your password and whatever, you get your account back, it's kind of a hassle, but it's a very different story if you lose all of your money because, you know, you're no longer in possession of your private keys. So I think security solutions that are focused on consumers and institutions are going to be coming to market in the next, you know, 6 to 18 months, and I think that's a really important first step. And the other one we talked about before, scalability. So until we can process a really high volume of transactions, we won't really be able to have this rich ecosystem of apps that are built on blockchains because we just can't handle the volume.
I think another area to add to that, I think it's exactly right. So scalability, reliable platforms is, you look at any great market or any economy, you got to have really good on and off ramps.
And live ramps.
And live ramps and RampUps 18. RampUp 18, everyone. Woo! So we're not talking about on and off ramps. I'm talking about fiat money, so currency we hold in our hands, going into cryptocurrency and cryptocurrency going out. Right? The on and off ramps are still very bumpy. They are like fraught with
Very few.
They're very collected together, I guess undistributed. And so you've got all these hacks and all those kind of things. Just if you could have easy contracts of moving money in and money out, and that whole process, going from, I think we're like MS-DOS right now. We need like the Windows and then the iOS to come. So if we can get that with the on and off ramps, I think that's going to boom the industry.
Great. So just to recap a few of the awesome insights that we got from our panel today, we're looking at this phase 3 of advertising where advertisers actually provide direct value to their consumers. We started to learn about this with people providing content and entertainment and information through advertising the last few years, and that's a big step up, and I think all this modernization is going to make that phase 1 advertising where you really just exploit the consumer very passé. What we really need to look for right now is how can we improve the transparency of the programmatic advertising business. And to do that, we're going to need to have better scalability and better security. Some companies that you guys could look at, things like Datum, which are helping people sell data, MetaX, which is helping with click fraud, which is obviously a huge industry problem, and things like Brave, where you actually get people to sell their attention instead of just trying to cram ads down their throats. But with ad blocking being such a highly prevalent thing that people are doing, you guys really need to think about how can you provide value through the blockchain to potential customers rather than just try to pull value away from them. And that means finding really great partners that are super high reputability. There's so many scammers in this business, so find people who are actually building real things on the blockchain today, not in some far-flung future. People who actually have an incredible team together and are building things with real utility, not just a promise. And don't trust anyone who tells you that they've got the secret formula or they know the tricks. But if you guys just keep an eye on it, it might not be here today, but I think if you keep those ideas in mind about looking for reputability, scalability, and security, when it's time, your businesses will thrive with the blockchain. So thank you guys all for talking and staying here with us. Thank you guys for being our panelists.
Thank you.
Give it up to the panelists.
We're going to